Good morning, everybody. So we are here today with Mr. David Nicolas Ruiz, who is a unique Belizean writer. Mr. Ruiz was born on the 13th of August 1966 in Benqueviejo del Carmen. So up to date, Mr. Ruiz has written 7 books, which include Old Benque in 1990, God Save the Queen in 1995, La Visita in 2000, Jonas Matapalo in 2003, La Visita in 2005, Under the Yax'ché Tree 2011, and a historical walk through Benque in 2018. So today we are here featuring one of Mr. Ruiz's book, which is called Under the Yax'ché Tree. And I would like to begin by having Mr. Ruiz share with us some of his educational background and some of his hobbies. Good morning, Mr. Ruiz.
Good morning, Ms. Sara. Thank you for being here. I was born and raised in Benque, educated in Belize. I have a degree in biology education and also a degree in pastoral studies. My hobbies include basically reading and writing. I guess the interest for writing stems from a strong reading background. I also have an avid passion for community service in the field of culture. I started a group back in 1992 which strongly promotes cultural retrieval, and we have undertaken quite a few projects in the community, like the institution of the House of Culture and the management of Centennial Park. So practically these are my hobbies.
Now we are coming back to your educational background. Could you share with us some of your educational background?
Well, I said no, I was educated in Belize. I went through studies at University College, what is now UB, University of Belize. And that kind of put me into administration, in the planning unit at the ministry, and then I moved on to being the principal at Mo Carmel High School, and then transitioned into the newly established junior college, John Paul II, where we are at this moment.
So today we are featuring this book Under the Yax'ché Tree. Could you briefly describe your book to us?
Well, as you listed all the books that I have written and published, Under the Yax'ché is one of those publications that is not really widely known as Old Benque, which was published in 1990. Under the Yax'ché was a first attempt in publishing in English after Jonas Matapalo, which is a children's book written in English and Spanish. Under the Yax'ché captures the essence of oral literature, what has been slowly and gradually lost in Belize across all cultures. And it captures the essence of what our parents, grandparents, all these stories that were passed on to us. And it has a number of stories which go all the way from narrating the stories of the Cadejo, which we believe protects and also keeps people away from doing evil. We have also narrated in this anthology the tradition of All Souls, belief in the people that have gone over to the afterlife. Also, it captures the story of the Ishtabai. So it's a series of 8 short stories which bring to life the traditions, the oral stories, literature of Western Belize.
Okay, so coming back now to your first book, which is Old Benque in 1990. How did this book change or actually actually influence your process of writing?
Well, 1990, that's some years ago, no? I recall that Old Benke was born as a project for University College of Belize, as a matter of fact, in one of the Spanish courses that I did. So I was encouraged by my teacher to present to a publishing house, and I did. It was to Kubola, and I was fortunate to have this published at such a young age. And again, it captures the essence of oral literature. And as I said, sadly enough, it's something that has died away, and there is still some around, but much of it has been lost. So Old Benke the value of it is that it has documented what could have been lost. So in that respect, I have taken oral literature, the folklore, as a sort of a style to present current issues. For instance, I just finished writing a story on the migrants, the women that migrate with this dream of getting a better life somewhere out there. It could be Belize, the United States. And they end up being victims of trafficking, human trafficking. So in this story, I portrayed Luz Marina, or this lady, who migrates thinking she's going to get to have a better life in Belize, and she ends up being a captive of the modern human trafficking, which is enslaved young women. And so I present this through the folklore, oral literature, oral stories of the lady, the apparition, and the road to Benke's and Nancy.
So, Mr. David, what kind of research do you do, and how much time do you actually spend researching before you actually start writing your book?
Sarah, that's a very good question, and it all depends on the theme and what kind of writing you're doing. In my case, many of my stories are historically based, and I guess every piece of writing has a cultural context. So the writer has to be very much knowledgeable about the theme and the background. So, for instance, Under the Yax'ché is a result of many years of gathering stories from the elders. Upon doing Old Benke, I remember interviewing many people, and that was an exercise I continued after the publication of Old Benke. So the stories here under the Ashtray are different than the ones in Old Benke. And that's why the importance of this book in preserving the oral literature and documenting it. On the book, God Save the Queen, another example, is the context is the nationalist movement as experienced in Benke, in the west outside Belize City. It was an attempt to portray the nationalist movement and what happened during that era of the dawn of nationalism outside the context of the urban Belize City, because much of it has not been captured, what happened outside the urban area, what was then the capital in Belize City. So it depends. So for under the nationalist, the theme, much research had to be done to portray the gist of what is gospel.
Mr. David, how do you select the names of your characters?
Again, many people claim, Don Enrique, for example, in God Save the Queen, was my great-grandfather. Names are coincidental, no? They're not really selected. They're arbitrarily chosen. So names like Enrique, Luz Marina, those are common names in Mestizo culture. So there's really not a particular selection of names. And in most of my publications, I have even changed the names of the communities because part of the publications are partly true, partly fiction, no? Semi-fictitious.
Mr. David, why did you aspire to become a writer?
I really did not aspire, like you were saying, your daughter wants to be an archaeologist. It never dawned on me to say or think or to feel that I wanted to be a writer. I guess it's something that is natural. Every person brings their own gifts, desires, talents, you may call them. And in my case, I guess it's something that was there, and I probably inherited this skill, and it was nurtured. It was nurtured by my educational background, by my mentors, teachers, the elementary school, the high school. I was very much gifted in having teachers for a prolonged period of time, the same teachers. For example, my English teacher in high school was the same throughout first, second, third, and fourth form. So I believe that continuity is very important in cementing, providing the foundations to strengthen a particular skill. So it all stems from this interest and liking towards reading and writing. And as I was telling you, the younger the person is, she is exposed at a very young age, the person is more malleable and more inclined to grow in that discipline. So I believe it was a matter of chance, could be of genetics, the environmental kind of, you might say, confabulation. It was, everything came together to for me to grow in that inclination towards the art. And you know, like anything, you need to have a certain mastery of the basic tools to enable you to become better and better at it.
Mr. David, what piece of advice would you give to our young Belizean writers?
Young Belizean writers, I always share the fact that John Paul II, who is now Saint John Paul II, whose name we've baptized the school, he always, on his travels to every country, practically he visited nearly all countries in the world, he would request for the publications of writers, for the works of all artists in that country, to be given to him so that he could have an idea of the struggles of each country, of each nation. And I say that the best people who have been able to capture the spirituality, that energy present in every nation has been and will be the artists. And we're talking about writers, we're talking about dancers, playwrights, actors, actresses. So these people, artists, capture the essence of what people are. No? So young people, I would say, if you have that inclination, you nurture it. And what do I mean by nurturing it? You feed your desire, no? In a positive manner. All ancient philosophers agree to the fact that to become good at something, you have to exercise, you have to be disciplined. So like in any case, Eric Fromm, a German philosopher, says that the art of love is an art in itself, no? And we can exercise the art of love, and any art, by becoming good at it. And how can you become good? Is by disciplining yourself. It's not just having a desire and an inclination. You have to discipline You have to give time to your art, to practice your art. It's not you just become an aficionado. No? To master means to discipline. And you have to put your whole heart, your whole mind, your whole soul, as Jesus later tells us. And that is the art, mastering the art of love, and we can apply it to any art. No? So for young people, read and write. Discipline yourselves to reading and writing, to mastering the power of the word, and then you will utilize those tools to put in your to channel your creativity. And that's important. Stay away from the internet as much as possible, from the social media, because that's superficial reading and writing. We need to delve in more and more. And in the end, I will move away, and as David Price, my Belizean teacher, studies teacher, said, we're all moving out of this world, and our vocation, our mission is to leave Belize a better place, because that's our home. And the young people will inherit this home, and they need to follow the footsteps of all statesmen and women to make this place a better place.
So, Mr. David, thank you very much for those encouraging words. And we would like to close off by having Mr. Ruiz sharing with us a part of his book we are featuring today, Under the Yax'ché Tree.
Yes, Ms. Sara, thank you for this opportunity. And I will read a part of the story Under the Yax'ché. The Yax'ché is the sacred tree of in Mayan cosmology. And it is the tree where the spirit of Ishtabai lures and has an appointment with every man and woman. And it's important because under the Ashtray is where the stories are said. No? So in this story, we have this guy by the name of Manuel, and it's not Manuel that lived 300 years ago. It could be any Manuel. It could be you or I, it could be Justin or myself. But Manuel meets his lover, thinking he's his lover, she's his lover, but in fact it's Ishtabai. And in Maya's mestizo belief, we believe that every woman has an Ishtabai. Miss Sara has an Ishtabai, meaning somebody that looks like her. No? And we also know that Ishtabai lures unfaithful men to their death. And that's the value of this folk tale. So in this story, Manuel meets the Ishtabai of his lover. Who used to be his lover because he was married to already, he had a wife. And his wife was having a child, she was childbearing. And the child was being born, but couldn't be born. In her delivery, the child was entangled in his cord, right? Estaba amarrado. And in the olden days, when a child was being born and he or she was entangled in the umbilical cord, the wise women believed that it was a hex, because the child could be born, could be a stillbirth, right? So what happened was that the old women, the wise women, had an instrument. It was a wooden tool that they would insert while the mother was delivering the child and disentangle the child. So the Manuel is sent for this tool in Sokots. It was called the Pabila. And on his way to the house with the tool, he meets the spirit of the Ishtabai, thinking she was his lover. I would say, I don't want to give away the ending of the story, but in the very end, it was one of the only stories that elders told me whereby a woman was able to defeat the spirit of Ishtabai. Nowhere in all these narratives of Ishtabai do we hear the spirit being defeated, but it was a story, and this is a true story, whereby the Ishtabai was defeated. But that's till the very end. I will only read this part where Emmanuel meets the spirit. Manuel looked around. It was a familiar voice, low-keyed and sensual. "My love." "It's Margarita," he whispered. Feeling his thoughts quicken, he searched around, trying to see the woman to whom he had promised everlasting love. Then as his eyes turned towards the ceiba tree, he noticed the silhouette of a fair maiden, clothed with the silver streaks of the moon. Margarita looked more beautiful than ever and did not seem to be ailing as people claimed. Chismes, all gossip, Manuel thought. People were always blowing things out of proportion. The girl was leaning against the trunk of the tree, brushing her long black hair that went far below her waistline. A smile was drawn across her rosy lips, and her deep brown eyes were fixed on the handsome boy. Manuel felt hypnotized by her gaze that seemed to touch deep into his heartstrings. "Dios mío, is she, you're so beautiful." Manuel had not been able to resist talking to her. The words had just flowed to his lips. He drew closer and was tempted to brush her cheeks, but then, having second thoughts, withdrew. "Bésame," she murmured, closing her almond-shaped eyes. Manuel felt his blood rushing to his head, and a sudden heat flickered down his body. She was wearing the white lace Yucatecan huipil that covered down her ankles, the same dress she had when he first met her at the velada on Good Friday. She had on her black shawl wrapped around her arms, which blended into her thick, wavy hair. "Kiss me," Margarita insisted. The young fellow drew closer, mesmerized by the enchantment of the fair damsel. He made an attempt to pull her closer to him and was about to press his lips against her lips when he felt his hand sinking into what seemed to be an infested termite's nest. Instantly, Manuel pulled backwards. Margarita looked at him with passionate eyes. "Bésame," she said once more, pulling on him. As Manuel held his arms around her once more, his hand sank into what felt again like a hollow piece of rotten wood. He attempted to look behind the girl, but Margarita kept pulling him. Then, when he turned to look at her, he came face to face with the most hideous being he had ever seen. The eyes that had been inflamed with love had rolled back to reveal two empty sockets. Her narrow-bridged and pointed nose had transformed into a huge warty spike that curved downwards. "Bésame, amor mío," she said, no longer in the soft voice that evoked passion, but in a hoarse tone that seemed to be coming from the deep recesses of Xibalba, the world of the dead. As she spoke, she revealed some huge, pointed teeth. Manuel was stunned. He felt a shiver on his back as if a giant Tommy Goff snake was slithering down his spine. The young man tried to scream, but nothing but a whimper came out. In his desperation, he remembered Gloria Elena, his wife, and Doña Cristina, who were waiting for him. Strangely enough, his right hand still clung to the white bag that held the papilla. He tried to move, but he felt the claws of the creature holding him back. Then, in his nightmare, Manuel closed his eyes and muttered the prayer against evil winds and spirits taught to him by Don Fidencio. Gathering all his strength, He feverishly pulled back and disengaged himself from the terrifying woman whose hair kept wiggling around him like a handful of deadly snakes. Still holding on to the bag, he stumbled and tried to run towards his house. The malicious creature reached out to grab him. It shrieked and then gave a blood-curdling laugh that echoed along the valley. Thank you.